All right. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Mike.
All right. So you're all muted, just so you know. That's by design. See some familiar faces. That's pretty cool. Herman, hello. I see you're there. We're joining. All right. I think we're live on Facebook Live. You can, if you're on Facebook Live, you can write or you can ask questions in the live feed, and we have people from Dynon that are standing by to answer those questions. If you're in the Zoom, you can type questions there as well, although of course you will be able to talk to us to chat there as well. All right, looks like it's all stabilizing. Looks like people are here and get started. So welcome everybody. This is the I think it's the fifth event that we've done on Friday nights, sort of these weekly. A lot of them are what we call virtual booth visits, where we kind of are adapting to the times. Most of the air shows and fly-ins this year are going to be canceled, although there's one happening in Mexico, Missouri this weekend. So what we've been doing are, as what we call these virtual booth visits, where this is sort of the same thing as if you came up to the Dynon booth at Sun and Fun or Oshkosh or at the Zenith Open House, and we spent a half hour, an hour talking through a system, what it does, features, neat stuff, little tips and tricks. So along with that, we'll take any of your questions. And then today, this event is both us here at Dynon, co-presented with Zenith Aircraft. We have Sebastian and Roger and Mark, who's a recently completed builder of a Zenith aircraft that has our products. We'll be talking about that as well. There's a few other Dynon people with me, Jeff, Kyle, Robert. Some of them will be answering your questions that you type out either on Zoom or on Facebook. And the way this works, if you're in Zoom, you're muted right now, so that we can sort of hear, so that I can hear everything and talk to whoever I'm talking to. If I'm talking to somebody, if you want to ask a question, you can do it in the chat, as I mentioned, or especially when I ask, what I'll do is I'll stop periodically. You can raise your hand if you're in the Zoom app on your computer. It's under the participants button, so that's at the bottom, and then there's a little raise hand. And so you can raise your hand that way when I prompt you. There's also ways to answer yes or no to questions if we do that. And let's see, what else do I need to tell you? So what I will do is as I go through the little, I have a panel here, which we'll switch that camera to in a few minutes. I'll go through a little section of the system, like the primary flight display or the engine monitor. And after that, I'll ask for questions about that, that area. If you have something else that I haven't gotten to yet, just, hold your question till the end. We'll have questions at the end as well. And then the only other thing I would ask is, although, is if you have a technical support question, I'm pretty well versed in our products, but trying not to do too much tech support live on these, although we're at the end, I'm happy to field any questions until you guys are done, basically. Let's see, I think that's all of the kind of housekeeping and how this works. So I mentioned with us today, we have, we're presenting this with Zenith Aircraft, and we have Sebastian, Heinz, and Roger from Zenith. And Sebastian, how's it going?
Good. I'm doing real well, and I probably got the most comfortable seat of all of you guys out there. I'm actually sitting in one of our airplanes out here, so, and I think you can see, but you can see I've got a couple of the Dynon panels right here in front of me, the SkyView HDX panels and our CH650, and this is just a real comfortable airplane to be sitting in. So I'm going to be doing this presentation sitting in the airplane. I'm inside the hangar. We actually had a really bad storm come by a minute ago, but it seems to be blowing by us. So, but anyway, I want to thank you, Mike, and the rest of the Dynon crew for putting this on. I think it's great that you're taking the opportunity to do these kinds of events, because again, we need to, during this pandemic, we need to continue to build and so forth. So this is great that you're able to put these on. So again, I thank you for putting this together, and I thank all of you guys that are out here. I see a lot of familiar faces, current Zenith builders that can learn a little bit more about installing Dynon avionics in their aircraft. And we have Mark Pensenstadler with us as well. And now, Mark, I know a lot of you guys have been following Mark with his CH-750 cruiser airplane as well, and he'll be joining us.
Sebastian, we lost your audio. Give us a second here.
Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
We're back on? Yeah.
Yep, you're good.
I hit the mute button on my headset accidentally. Sorry about that. And, like I was saying, Mark is with the CH-750 Cruiser is with us, and he did his first flight earlier in this week, and he has dual Dynon screens in his airplane. Talk a little bit what the features of his airplane, how he chose it, and so forth. And then of course Roger Dubert from the Zenith factory is with us, and he'll be able to share a lot of good information about installing Dynon panels and all the components behind the screen as well. So I'm real happy to be here with all of you tonight and share as much as we can about building and flying our Zeniths and putting Dynons on the panel.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And actually, it's kind of, I guess we put together this event, but you actually invited us, I guess it was a few weeks ago now, to do something like this, and we put it together. So it's real fun to do these, and it's also fun to see you, even though we're halfway across the country, to have a community like this that comes together. There are already 50+ people in the Zoom. I'm not sure how many people are in the Facebook, but probably a good amount there.
Yeah, that's kind of great to be able to do that. It's one thing on the one hand, with this pandemic going on, that it's sad that we can't meet in person, but it's also kind of great that we can do these virtual events. Again, we have participants from around the world. It's kind of great to be able to see that and do that. So I'm kind of fortunate to be able to do that. And we've been real busy here at the factory. Number one, busy. Delivering product to our customers. Earlier today and yesterday, we had the first in-person workshop here at the factory that we haven't done that since end of last year. We were discussing that earlier today, that I think December was our last actual in-person workshop here at the factory. And it's nice to be able to do that again. Finally, we're real pleased and fortunate to be able to do that. And then tomorrow we are actually having our fly into summer event. Tomorrow is the first day of summer, I believe, or longest day of the year. And so it'll be a little bit of a smaller event than what we would normally do, but at the same time, it's happy to see people flying again and getting on with our lives, enjoying airplanes and continuing to build and be active. So again, we're happy to do what we can to do that. And then again, thank you, Dynon, for hosting this event.
You guys have been doing your own set of virtual events as well, right? Are you doing things every week or two, or what have you guys been doing?
Yeah, well, again, our factory workshops, we switched those over to virtual events, and we did two full workshops that way, and it was kind of neat to see. We had participants around the country building airplanes, and starting to build virtually around the country. We actually had, I see you guys are in Seattle. We actually had one customer, right in Seattle. He was actually in an office space and building the rudder tail section of the airplane. So it was kind of real neat to be able to see that. And so, yeah, we've done our own virtual events as much as possible. Again, and, the social distancing or physical distancing, I guess we could call it, it's not a bad thing to be, if you're currently building an airplane, that's really not a bad time to be doing that, because most folks are kind of doing that on their own anyway in their garage or basement workshop. So it's real neat to to be able to continue to build. And for us, we kind of take it on as a responsibility as a kit manufacturer to continue to supply parts as well as support to our customers during this time so that they can continue to build, because again, it is a good activity to do that. Just like after World War II or whichever whatever event, you had a bunch of the baby boom after a bunch of time. I think we may see an airplane boom a little bit after this COVID experience. A lot of people have been building airplanes, and it'll be nice to see all these 2001 airplanes out there. It would sure be nice to see that.
Yeah, it is sort of the right time to, as long as that we're supposed to be a thing apart from each other a little bit more and a little more isolated. This is a perfect isolation activity. So is flying, for that matter.
And that's exactly it. Yeah, we've been encouraging folks to continue to fly, stay current, and enjoy flying airplanes. And at least in the U.S., we've been able to continue to do that. I know we had some customers, I think, New Zealand comes to mind. They actually shut down all of general aviation in New Zealand with the pandemic, but luckily in the U.S. we haven't had that. So it's definitely a good activity to continue to do.
Yeah, I was able to go flying. When was it? It was probably sometime in April. I forget exactly when. And when Seattle was hard shut down, and it was weird, just looking down at the normally full I-5 and parks and just everything. It was like zombie land. It was interesting, serene. It was just surreal, actually, I guess is the best way to describe it. It was also great to get up into the sky.
Yeah, absolutely. I know some folks were able to fly into Las Vegas. They had to actually shut down the Las Vegas Tower for a while, and so it became an uncontrolled airport. So kind of nice for us general aviation pilots to be able to visit airports that sometimes we wouldn't be able to otherwise.
There's a Facebook group they exist around the country, but the one in Seattle is called Flights Above the Pacific Northwest. Right. And what people were, it became a sport for a while to do either touch and goes at SeaTac or to do all the things that they normally don't let you do at SeaTac. That became I'm guessing you can't probably do much of that anymore. It's gotten a little bit busier. Some of the flights have resumed, but people had some awesome videos of just playing airliner.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing that things are getting back to normal, though.
Yeah,
for sure.
So tell us about the airplane you're in and the panel that you're sitting in front of.
Okay, well, I'm in the CH650, which is our low-wing cross-country cruiser airplane. I'll kind of move my laptop, give you a little bit better view of in front of me right here. And again, that's our CH650 airplane. Pretty much all our airplanes are configured very similar inside the cabin. Side-by-side configuration. We have this Y-stick control yoke, which works out really well. And again, we've got the dual Dynon screens in this one. We've got the 10-inch right here in front of me, and the smaller 7-inch in front of the passenger side. And again, real nice configuration, real bright screens. We've been using these in our aircraft for quite a while now, quite a few years. I think we were one of the early adopters when Dynon came out. We saw the potential for them in light aircraft in the sense of ease of installation, and again, feature for feature, it just provides a lot of great information for builders. So again, this is a CH650. Of course, we have our high wing models as well, the CH750 Cruiser, Stoll, and the Super Duty models, and very, very similar configurations. And like I mentioned, we've been using the Dynons, I don't know how many years now, but quite a few years. We've seen the evolution of the products. These are the HDX models with the touchscreen, really easy to use and nice and bright screens. So been using these pretty extensively now over the years, and we pretty much have them installed in all our demo aircraft here at the factory, because it's really something that demonstrates well and is easy to use for us to go cross-country flying and so forth. And most of our flying here is local flying with for demo flights and so forth, but at the same time we do use our aircraft quite extensively for cross-country flying, and so it's just nice to be able to have the full database, everything in right there, and very capable to do all the flying that we want to do.
Yeah, as the marketing guy, I absolutely love watching all of you. You know, you do a lot of posting of videos and stuff, and I love that that we get a lot of screen time out of HDX in your demo airplane.
Right.
So thank you for that.
Oh, sure. And I don't know if you saw, but even earlier today, this afternoon, Roger and I went flying in this airplane, and we did a kind of around the patch kind of flight, just showing again the features and talking about the workshop, and then again this presentation tonight, as well as our open hangar day tomorrow. So it's a good opportunity to see it. And again, what better place to do it than actually inside the airplane in real time. So that's why we love to do this and love to share our enjoyment of flying and showing the capabilities of these light airplanes.
Awesome. Let's see, we also have a couple other people from Zenith or associated with Zenith, and Mark Hendenstadler, is that right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you just got done building your aircraft.
I did. I have the 750 Cruiser. It took me just under 5 years to build, which is a lot longer than normal, but just life events come up in the way. But just flew it. Well, it was funny because Sebastian was saying about the baby boomers and the airplane boomers. So I had a lot of time off of work in the last month or two, and I used that time to really get the airplane done and finished up, and I just did the first flight. So this might be the first airplane of the airplane boomers coming out. So, but yeah, I got a Dynon panel in it. I've got about 4 hours of flight time on it now, and I'm really, really pleased with it. Everything works fantastic. One of my initial concerns was because there's so much glass on this airplane, even the whole top is a glass window. I was worried about maybe the sunlight washing out the screen, but I've never ever had an issue with not being able to read the Dynon. It's even in the direct sunlight, it's still nice and bright. So it's been working real nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's something that we've improved incrementally, and actually with SkyView in a pretty big way over the years. You know, admittedly, our very early products, you know, people would, you know, our smaller screen, you know, what we call our first generation EFISs, the D10 and D100 series, great products, and we eventually made super bright screens for them. But we would get people saying like, oh, I have, you know, open canopy cockpit, and if you hit it just right with the sun, it's a little bit hard to read. But with SkyView, it's like SkyView's like double, and then SkyView HDX it's not double, but it's another increment above that. So we're throwing, I think it's 1,300 something nits of light, you know, the way you measure it there. So it's a pretty compelling screen. And with HDX as well, we changed the surface finish. You know, our SkyView Classic and SkyView SE, which we still sell, has more of a matte finish, which some people do like. But a lot of people really, especially with laptops as well, are used to a glossier finish screen. It still has an anti-glare coating on it. And what I always like to remind people is if they do prefer the matte finish, you can use any off-the-shelf screen protector. So the sort of things that you could buy for like an iPad or iPad Pro these days, or a laptop, you know, trim it to size, and they come in a variety of different finishes, and you can kind of tailor, you know, how the screen, you know, looks in your aircraft, or, you know, to what finish you prefer, and that doesn't affect the touch screen or anything like that. And you know, it's strong glass. You know, I don't know if we've ever really had, other than actual damage, or, you know, like you know, the occasional airplane that's been involved in an incident. But you know, the screens are strong without screen protectors, so don't think you need to go out and put a piece of glass like on a cell phone. You don't need to. The glass is actually quite strong, but there are options there for people that want a softer finish. So how did you end up choosing Dynon?
Well, I had my second airplane I built was a Rans S6, and I actually had your D100 in there, so I was a little bit familiar with Dynon already. And then when it came time to choose a panel for the Cruiser, I don't remember what year it was, a year or two ago at Oshkosh. You know, I went around and looked at all the manufacturers, and I was just really impressed with the Dynon. Just the clarity of the screen, it's unbelievably crisp. And I'll tell you, one of the things that attracted me most to the HDX is the bottom of the screen. It's angled out, because in the Zenith, the pilot sits up high and the instrument panel is low, which is awesome for visibility, but it's I think unique, because most airplanes, you know, the top of the panel is kind of at your eye level. And with the Zenith panel being lower, I love having the bottom of the HDX screen angled out, because it's just so easy to hit the buttons. And it also gives you something to rest your hand on while you're either touching the screen or the buttons. So yeah, I was already familiar with the products, and I just, like you said, all the updates that have been done to it, I just thought that HDX would be perfect for this plane.
Awesome. Well, thanks for choosing us. Yeah, you keyed in on something, which is that in small, light aircraft, touchscreens are great. We all know how to use touchscreens. They're pervasive in our phones and in our tablets. But if you're in a small airplane and you're working on a screen, which is kind of almost at arm's length, and you're in turbulence, that's where a touchscreen can be for some operations not ideal. And so we already have the full buttons and knobs, and you can do practically everything with the buttons and knobs that you can do on the touchscreen. I'll get into that in a bit. But also now you have anchoring points. At the bottom, as you said, the bezel is canted out at a 45-degree angle, and also there's little handholds. I don't know if you found them yet on the side as well. There's kind of like you can wrap your fingers around. There's a little
I never noticed.
Yeah, so that helps as well, especially when you're if you're using your thumb on the map or touching the airspeed tapes to select those on the knob. Well, thanks for choosing us and for sharing your project. Now, you have your paint job's kind of interesting. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I've got ever since I'm gonna turn my camera around here. When I saw the Blue Angels at Oshkosh, whatever year that was, a few years ago, I just kind of fell in love with the Blue Angels. So, obviously while building the airplane, I came up with a ton of paint schemes, and I wanted to see how maybe the paint scheme from the Blue Angel C-130 would look on here. And it just looked really nice on this airplane. It just fit the airplane well. So that's the paint scheme I did. And then also, if you guys want to see the panel, I've got, I've got the HDX here, the comm radio and the intercom. Now this isn't a dual Dynon panel. This is a mount for an iPad. And what's interesting is for the 4 hours that I've been flying already is I've noticed that I never use the iPad because everything I need is on the screen right here. And with this being right in front of me, it's so easy just to use this. All the ADS-B information for other airplanes and stuff is on here. Obviously all the engine gauges, but I never use the iPad. So lesson learned for me on my next airplane, I won't even bother putting in the iPad because everything I need is right here, right in front of me. So.
What you really need are, two SkyView screens, I think.
Well, that would be cool. That would be cool. Yep.
One thing that's interesting, and our systems do have compatibility with iPads. Apps like ForeFlight or FlyQ. You can tie them to SkyView. You can beam flight plans, and we can send traffic and weather to them from our ADS-B. But what people don't realize is, although iPads are really powerful and they're great, kind of when you have them maybe on your knee or you're holding them up in the cockpit or have it really close to your face on, a lot of people use articulating arms to get them pretty close. But the iPad interfaces are, kind of those touch screens, and you need pretty fine motor control. And, we've sort of optimized SkyView, especially with HDX over time, to have the information that you really need while you're flying. And not that the iPad apps don't do a good job of that as well, but a lot of them are so feature rich that some of that gets a little bit, lost in flight, as you found, can be a little bit harder to use than just doing it right through SkyView. So don't mind hearing that you're using that more than the other thing.
Yeah, I kind of wish I never put it in now. But there now if I wanted, I guess.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your project. Are there any things that as you were building or installing, any tips for other people building your airplane model, as it pertains to SkyView?
Well, I've had a couple people have asked me a few questions because I have a YouTube channel, as some of you guys know, and through that channel, I get a lot of emails from people asking questions. And the two most questions I get is, well, most recently, is the Dynon easy to use? Was it hard to set up? And I just tell people, no, it's not. It's you hold two buttons down to get to the menu, and from there, it's just scrolling right through and just setting everything you want. It really couldn't be simpler. The other thing is for people that have just purchased the stuff, they're asking how easy is it to install and wire. And what I tell people is when I first got this, I bought everything together. So I had the SkyView, the intercom, the radio, the transponder, just everything I needed. I got it all at once. And when you lay it all out on a table and you see all this equipment and all these wiring harnesses and this big, thick, installation manual, it looks kind of scary and overwhelming. And you're thinking, geez, how am I going to figure out how to wire this all up? But the thing is, when you start looking at the manual and you look at each, say like the radio, if you're going to wire the radio, and you just look at a simple wiring diagram, and it tells you, purple wire goes to here, red wire goes to here. It looks overwhelming at first, but when you just sit there and look at it for a little bit, it really, really starts to make a lot more sense. And it's not as challenging as somebody might think when they're just looking at all this wire.
Yeah, admittedly, our manuals have gotten bigger our installation manual is now, I think, pushing 500 pages. And as you said, it's sort of a manual of many products in one. We are actually working on a revamp of those manuals to bring the really core information into the installation manual and to break some of the other ancillary stuff out into different other documents. Another thing that, I don't know, I assume that you probably use a lot of our pre-made wiring harnesses, SkyView Network, and some of the other things. And as you alluded to, they're color coded. Well, so SkyView Network is really just like bang, bang, plug and play. It's a 9-pin connector. It just goes into all the devices and the hubs. And then all of the other, whether it's engine gauge instruments or engine sensors or the 37-pin main harness on each display and the serial ports, is literally color coded. In fact, even like the GPS, which is a serial device from a technical perspective, it's got power, ground, and 2 serial cables, and it matches 4 wires on the 37-pin harness. So we work real hard to try to make that, even though the manual is admittedly kind of beefy these days, to simplify it down. We also have another thing that we probably need to feature a little bit more, but we now have a wiring, I don't know what you call it, like a wiring schematic diagram that's only a few pages long. It's on our website in the installation documentation section, and that is sort of if you just kind of want to know, like, how does it all wire together? It kind of shows like a stereotypical system, with 1 or 2 screens and all the different interconnects that'll happen. So sort of a nice little shortcut schematic view that, doesn't replace the installation manual, that's for sure. But it kind of, especially when you're doing what you were just saying, laying things on the table, like how do things go together? There's now a document just for that. Almost no words, just, wires, pins, devices, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And even like you said, that manual is like 500 pages long. And when I first downloaded that manual, that was what was scary to me. It's like, holy cow, there's 500 pages. But really, when you break it down, because I don't have Autopilot and all these other things, there's probably only about 20 or 30 of those pages that pertain to what I did. So, most of that manual you can pretty much throw away and just take out the 20 or 30 pages you need, and it makes it a lot less intimidating.
Yeah. And then one of the reasons that, we do try to write, because although, a lot of folks at Dynon are software people and electrical engineers, we know that most people building airplanes, if you look at the statistics, most people are likely not to be an electrical engineer or a hyper technical person. They're also probably doing, other than, let's say, housework and things like, that. The first really, it's the first time they probably built something airplane-like, and it's the first time they probably wired up a lot of electronics in that sort of deep way. And so we've tried to write it truly for that person, so there are sometimes more words than electrical connections, because we want you to understand what you're doing. And so we think that is helpful, although again, we are trying to refactor that a little bit.
Yeah, I found the manual is really good. The wiring diagrams are very helpful. And then also each component has, maybe a page of text and written instructions that helps a lot too. So it's I didn't really have any, I don't have a whole technical experience wiring airplanes, and, I got through it. So.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for sharing your experience, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I guess I'll move on to, is there anything else, Sebastian, that you wanted to mention, or should I move on to my next kind of the booth visit portion?
Well, not too much specific to add, except like Mark's experience shows. Again, most of our customers are, and like you mentioned, they're not electrical engineers and so forth. So one of the reasons supporting the Dynon instrument packages like that is because it's relatively easy to do, and that we can really supply customers with the full turnkey solution. And again, a typical builder, just like most of our builders are not, aircraft mechanics, have very limited airframe experience. It's something that, again, the typical person can learn and accomplish themselves. And so just, same thing, installing the a very capable glass panel display system that an average person can do, following your instructions and by purchasing a full kit, if you will. And Roger will talk a little bit about that a little bit later on in terms of what we supply to customers, where it's not just the hardware, but it's also all the little connectors and antennas and everything else, so that again it becomes a full solution that a typical builder can do without having that kind of background and again going through the instructions and so forth, having a very capable panel. And one thing I always kind of like to emphasize, and I think Mark touched on that, is again, our panel, we don't really make that the focus of our cabin area. We fly light airplanes to be able to look around us. And I know sometimes it's tempting, especially with these fancy glass panel displays, to really focus on what's in front of us on the panel itself. But when we're flying, we really want to enjoy ourselves as well. Especially a lot of us are daytime VFR pilots. So again, we're flying for the pure enjoyment of it. And I always tell people, you want your eyeballs to be outside, looking outside, and that's where too, the Dynon I think does an excellent job of that. Is it shows us all that critical information that we need to have. You got your engine instrumentation, your flight information, and your navigation all right there on one screen. And like Mark said, you really don't need that secondary screen in many cases. That you got everything right there at your fingertips. So that again, a few glances down at the screen to confirm everything is doing things properly, and then you can really concentrate on looking around you and enjoying the flight. So again, from that standpoint, it really works out really well to be able to do that. And I think, and I'm sure you'll cover a lot of that, is that a lot of folks, they don't realize how much information and how capable these panels are, that we can really run a lot of good information through there and again, have, really state-of-the-art information accessible to folks. And a lot of these experimental or amateur built light aircraft have really state-of-the-art panels, and a lot of people don't realize that. In some respects, your typical general aviation, whether it's Cessna or Piper, oftentimes will not have near as sophisticated of a panel as an affordable amateur built light aircraft. And so that's really something that a lot of builders can take advantage of, and makes in many ways flying easier and more accessible, because you're not having to spend huge amounts of money, and you have a very accessible and very complete panel.
Yeah, totally. You mentioned Roger and some of the things that Zenith provides for the panel, and of course Roger does all of the, I imagine, all of the kind of transition training and of course demo flying. So Roger, what's there we go. What are some of the things that you can add to that conversation?
Well, we supply the Dynon system, and it's a little unique compared to other vendors that sell your all's instruments. We try to provide a complete package. The panel's already pre-cut out for the instruments going in, the HDX or the COM or the intercom. And then we provide panel overlays covering. We provide the COM antennas, the pre-wired harness. We do use the pre-wired harness from Approach. It's a good system. Your guys' system's great. We've just been using it for a long time. And then we provide the stick grips, everything needed. So almost a one-stop shop in our instrument package. And most of our customers like that, because then they don't have to go to different suppliers to get the different items needed for their instrument panel. So it's a one-stop shop. And the only thing that we don't provide in the instrument package is like the ELT for the remote switch. That's about the only thing. Okay.
And then once you have somebody in an airplane, what are some of the things that you focus on, teaching somebody how to fly SkyView in a Zenith?
It does take a few hours if you're used to flying at steam gauges. I'd say the biggest challenge for most customers is flying with the strip airspeed indicator versus the needle. It takes a few hours to learn that, just because you're used to looking straight out the airplane and you're seeing that needle move. But you can always switch your screen to the regular steam gauge
back mode. Yeah,
exactly. So I would say that's the biggest part. And just sitting in your hangar playing with your, the different screens, just learn the system before you go fly. And then once you do that, then get in the air and then scroll through the systems, you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, we do have I'll demonstrate the 6-pack mode in a few minutes. And then, yeah, as you said, just if you have ground power, just before you even go fly, you can do almost everything in the airplane on the ground. And the other thing I've been, these sessions that we're doing right now, these stay up on our website. So this part that, where we're just talking about things won't be as interesting to people perhaps, but if you're looking for the training aspect, the next hour or so where I kind of go through the system actually is sort of a SkyView basics class. You'll even learn some kind of neat tricks along the way as well. So we're working on improving that experience to help people learn the product. All right, well, thanks for joining us today, Roger. And I think with that, I'm going to switch it over.
Mike, we've been in for about a half an hour now. There may be some folks with questions that perhaps have to get off before too much longer. I'm going to see if anybody has anything to say before we move on.
Okay. Yeah, any questions? So if you have a question, raise your hand, which is under the participants button under, there we go. Ron figured it out. So Ron, you're unmuted. What can we tell you?
Okay, I got some of my questions answered, but I don't know that I got them all answered. So I own a P210 Cessna and have been waiting forever to be notified by Dynon that the aircraft's been certified for the HDX. I guess in the email I just got, it is certified now. Nobody ever contacted me from Dinan, even though I was supposed to be on some sort of a notification list. So my next question is, what isn't certified yet for the P210 in your system?
Yeah, so if your airplane's on and sorry that you didn't get notified, we have an email list, and we also have our website's always kept up to date, dynoncertified.com. So apologies that we didn't somehow get you on our email list. But last summer, I think it was like last Oshkosh-ish, we certified almost 600 piston singles. So, most Cessnas, most Pipers, almost anything that's under 6,000 pounds, that's 6 seats or less, or fewer. You can now put SkyView HDX, a SkyView HDX based
One important point for Ron is he has a P model 210, which is a pressurized, which is something we are currently still limited on. We don't have pressurized models.
Why not?
Yeah. The certification requirements are different in pressurized aircraft. So the FAA has kind of different classes of airplanes and the pressurization adds, one notch more, complexity. So it's something that we'll certainly get to on the certified side, but it's not where we are today. And to answer the other part.
Okay, let me just say this about that. P210s are probably one of the most expensive aircraft in general aviation certified out there, save maybe Malibus and some others. From a pure cost standpoint of the owner hull value, you're probably looking for your entire system for P210 owners of 10% of our hull value versus your certifications for, say, Cessna 172s, where your system could cost 50% of the hull value. So I'm a little confused as to why your system that would sell easily to P210 owners seems to be getting short shift.
It's the honest truth is certification complexity and a reasonable order of operations in terms of complexity. So it is more complex in a different level of engineering to certify in your aircraft and an aircraft like yours than it is with some of the, call it the lower end, from your perspective, piston singles. So we'll get there. I can't give you, dates on, promise you on dates, but it, unfortunately, the only truthful answer I can give you right now is it's not approved, and we'll get there. So, I think with that, I'm going to move on to the virtual booth visit portion. So I'm just going to need it 1 second. I had a issue with my phone or my other camera, so let's take a second for me to get that back.
Digging around in the toolbox.
All right. So yes, I think one of our audio settings. So Jeff, there's now a new phone, which is, I think it says it's Mike. Can you find that? Yeah, it says Dynon Mike. That's going to be the one to highlight.
Okay. Dynon Mike. There it is.
All right. All right. So what I have here is a SkyView HDX panel. This is the same sort of panel that you would see if we were visiting at a show. And I'm just going to kind of go through all of the basic systems and how to use them kind of in kind of brief overview. So what is SkyView HDX? So it is basically everything in your panel. The only thing that we can't do is an IFR, GPS navigator. Everything else we can, SkyView can do. And so what does that mean? So everything is on basically one screen. Plus there are some additional, control panels, and you can do multiple screens as we see here. But the basic capabilities are primary flight instruments, moving map, engine monitor. Those are kind of like the big three. They have dedicated real estate. And then across the top, we have autopilot, transponder, timers and clocks, comm radio, which is on the top here. Also, there's a dedicated comm radio control panel, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And let's see what else. We have ADS-B in, traffic and weather. ADS-B out is part of the Mode S transponder, so that kind of comes, call it for free with the system. And that kind of covers, there's an HSI, I'll talk about that as well. And that's the major kind of functional components of the system. I'll start with just a really brief lesson. So you just, you get into an airplane, whether it's with Roger on a demo flight or your first flight. And these are the main things you need to know to operate everything in SkyView. So one, almost everything you can do with either the touch screen or with the hard buttons and knobs on the bottom. And so with the touch screen, things work as you expect. The moving map is, pinch to zoom, and you can touch, the autopilot to get the autopilot. That all works, it takes you a minute or two to discover that. In terms of the hard buttons and controls, everything that controls how things are displayed on the screen is under display. So under display, you can say go full screen. So now we have full screen PFD. Or under display, we can say primary flight display and moving map. So this lets us reorient how things are displayed. If I have two screens like I have here and I want to swap their contents, let's say you're teaching somebody to fly or giving a demo flight, and you just want to say, oh, here, you look at the map and we bring the primary flight instruments, there's a button to swap that. So this is all about screen configuration and information that's displayed on the screen. That's under display. There's some deeper setup things for that as well. Everything to control, called the avionics, what things do, that's under menu. So we have controls for autopilot, transponder, timer, comm radio, things like primary flight, how the primary flight display works, the map, the layers, whether you're looking at weather or sectionals or those sorts of things. So that's all under menu. the remaining buttons to the left are all flight planning and mapping. So FPL is flight plan, that brings up your flight plan. Info brings up information about the last thing you've chosen, whether it's an airport or an airspace, or in this case, it's Payne Field, which is up here in the Seattle area. Nearest is probably one of the most useful things, especially when you're just, flying locally or going for the, the $100 hamburger, which is, a lot of our missions, a lot of the time, that's our nearest list. So this is nearest airports, ADS-B weather, things like that. And then direct to is the, you can either type something in, and whether it's an airport or an intersection or whatnot, and that lets you go direct to somewhere real quick. So that's kind of everything you need to know on how the menu system works. And then there's two knobs, one on each side of the screen. Depending on what you have up on the screen, it may control. So if you have a primary flight display up, the knob nearest to it will control the primary flight display, adjustable things. If you have the map up, it's zoom in and zoom out. And if we've gone away from the airport, clicking that will bring you, or from the airplane, clicking that will bring you back. And then so going back to the one that's closest to the primary flight display. And by the way, if your primary flight display were over on the right, it would be the right knob. If we click that knob, you can see now we have a menu for adjusting your baro setting or your altimeter setting, course, which you would do if you had a nav radio connected, heading, which is of course just your heading bug and the thing that the autopilot will follow if you have that equipped. Similarly, your altitude bug, and then your vertical speed and indicated airspeed bugs. That's using the heart controls. As I mentioned, you almost always have two ways of doing things, the touch screen or the heart controls. I can also just touch those things. So if I want to adjust the altitude bug, I just touch altitude. You can see this flash blue and it says altitude. Now I'm adjusting my altitude choice. Same thing if I want to adjust heading. If I tap the heading, that just changed to heading, and now we're just spinning the knob to adjust that. And then similarly, we talked about all of the main controls for the different kind of subsystems in SkyView being under the menu button. So, we've got Autopilot, transponder, and comm radio and whatnot. All of those features that aren't flight display and map and engine are along the top bar here. And if we just touch the top bar, like where it says AP Autopilot, we get the Autopilot menu. So I can either go touch that for Autopilot or menu Autopilot. And if it is real turbulent, when you press menu, you don't even, it's too turbulent for you to even touch these. You can use the knob here as well to select, let's say, Autopilot again. So that's sort of like a 3-minute course on SkyView basics. Once you know those few things, which is what's under the menu, what's under the display, and what these things do, you basically can figure everything else out. But now I'll go a little bit through each of those sections for a little bit. Primary flight display, engine monitor, HSI, map, comm radio, transponder, and whatnot. Does anybody have any questions before I go on about kind of the general overview of how SkyView works? Looks like Arthur's got a hand up. Click the unmute button for you, Arthur. All right. Looks like your audio is not coming on. Also, Stephen, looks like you have your hand up. So Arthur, I'm gonna put your hand down because maybe you didn't mean that. And Stephen, I'm gonna click unmute for you. And Stephen, what can I answer for you?
Hi there. I was speaking with Kyle briefly regarding your guys' timeline on release of products. I'm in the infancy stages of a sub 50 Super Duty build, but some manufacturers say, oh, we're going to release a new panel every 5 years, every 10 years, or do you just release a panel when the new technology becomes available? I just hate to be that guy that I order a panel in 2019.
Yeah.
And 20, you guys come out with all brand new stuff.
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess the best way to answer it is, so the truthful answer is it's right. It's when the next product is ready. There's always a next product, whether it's in development or there's a vision for it. That's always the case with technology, right? So that's a fact of life. We came out with our first generation of products. The first one was 2003, but really 2004 is when it took off, the EFIS D10A and then the D100 series, all of that. And those were the only things we sold from like 2003 to 2009. So that's like, and that's just it's sort of the innovation period. We then came out with SkyView Classic 2000, what we now call SkyView Classic, in 2009. And that until 2014, and all the time that first generation stuff still available. In fact, we just started kind of quietly, discontinuing most of those products. We didn't, they haven't been selling as well as they used to. There were some parts lifetime limit, the parts that we had, not enough of to continue selling new and supporting the fleet out there. So, that's kind of how you do product life cycle sunsetting in general. Sure. So then SkyView was 2009 to today, but in 2014 was SkyView Touch. We did discontinue SkyView Touch a little bit after when we came out with SkyView HDX, which was 2018, I believe. And I guess, so if you just kind of look at the timing, basically most of our systems are kind of like, in prime position for at least 5 years. SkyView Touch really was SkyView Classic plus a touch screen, with a little bit of touch interface, and SkyView HDX was really the next generation, in terms of a real redo. And so that's only 2 years old. We still update software for SkyView Classic and SkyView Touch, not with as many features, although right now they are actually, a match on features that won't always be true. Sure. We've also done periodic, although we have more of these in the hopper that might be a little more long-standing, upgrade and trade-in programs that are pretty that have been in the past cost-effective. So we've done a Gen 1 to SkyView trade-in program. We're very likely to do a SkyView to SkyView HDX trade-in program, which is a lot of people are interested in that. There are thousands of people that have SkyView that really like HDX now that they've seen it at shows and whatnot. So the other thing I would say, we just certified SkyView HDX, so last year, I guess the year before. So there's still a pretty strong future for that product in experimental and certified. So I wouldn't worry at this point that it's, it's not here. It's still here. There's always a next thing. And, of course, we don't really talk about that. We follow kind of the tech model of, kind of springing on people for all the reasons that you do that to, surprise people and excite them. And, but HDX will be around for a while. And then,
for a 750 Super Duty, is the Dynon Autopilot compatible with that airframe?
Yes, I don't know the I believe so. Actually, is Sebastian or Roger, can you chime in on that? Do you have airframe application thoughts? Let's see.
I just asked him to unmute for Roger.
Okay. I believe the answer is yes. I can't promise that.
There we go. I'm on.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, you can actually use the Dynon Autopilot in the Super Duty. We haven't developed our own mounting hardware for the Autopilots yet, but I've got tons of pictures from existing customers that have done that. So that's our next project here, is to do a installation for the Autopilot for the Dynon. So in the Super Duty, it's basically the same fuselage as a 750 STOL and cruiser.
I just didn't know if there was any kind of stress issues regarding the bigger control surfaces and the same autopilot servos. Because I'm actually probably the abnormal from your normal customer. I was in the Navy for 22 years. I'm an avionics technician. I'm an electronics engineer, and I work with General Atomics on MQ-1Cs. So I understand some of the intricacies of the servo power, associated with control surface torque, put back on the servos, kind of thing.
Okay, well, we'll have to, once we get there, we'll have to probably do some testing on the, Super Duty. I mean, we haven't tried it yet, but on the 750 STOL and cruiser we have.
Okay.
So, yep, maybe you can help us out on that. Do that little development.
I'd be happy to.
And I think, unfortunately, we're going to disappoint you. You're going to be expecting all these like wires, and avionics are a professional trade, and we're just going to have these harnesses that come together real quickly.
That's okay. Simplicity is okay too.
Well, we have a number of different strength, torque levels of servos, as well as different arm lengths. Each one's got multiple holes drilled in it to trade off torque for throw. So you have a lot of configurability to find a matching set.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, thank you.
I'll IM you a data sheet for it. I'm sure you'll want to look at it.
Okay.
All right, I think next I'm going to go back to the panel. I'm going to kind of cover the primary flight instruments, the engine instruments, and probably the map all in one go, and I'll take some questions on that. So primary flight display, pretty straightforward, although as Roger was saying, if you've been flying behind steam gauges, conventional gauges for your whole life, it can be a little bit, it's new, it's something new. So we have airspeed, altitude, attitude, slip skid ball. This is your heading indicator. I'll just turn off all of the HSI features. So it's just a heading indicator with the number up top. When you're turning, there's a little bar. This little magenta bar is your rate of turn. It grows proportionately to your rate of turn at that second tick mark. That's your standard rate turn. So this is sort of your turn coordinator, or it is basically a turn coordinator. So these two together are kind of, your turn and bank, that arc and that ball. The ball works just as you would expect it would. This is, your attitude. It's got synthetic vision. All of that can be turned on and off. I'll get to that in a minute. Vertical speed. I'll just choose a new altitude to show the needle kind of going up and down. And then we have outside air temperature, density, altitude, your altimeter setting. And again, if I wanted to adjust that, I can just tap it and then adjust the altimeter setting. Or if we have ADS-B weather coming in, which you will most of the time here in the US, you can just press and hold the barrow button, and it'll sync to the nearest station. So it knows that, like at Payne Field, there's a weather report, the most recent METAR, and that number at 2960 is what it was. If you're on the ground and aren't getting ADS-B yet, it knows that you're on an airport. It knows the elevation of that airport through the database that you load into SkyView. So if you are on the ground and do this, it'll still say the airport, but it'll sync to the known elevation of the airport, or rather, it will adjust this number so that your altitude is the known elevation.
Wow.
True airspeed, which factors in OAT and all of the other elements that you need for true airspeed. Ground speed, which is really just your GPS speed. The difference between this and your wind is, let's just show you on the lower left here, your wind direction along with your crosswind component. So that's kind of nice on final to know how much of a crosswind you're facing, or at least coming down the pattern. Yeah, outside air temperature, I mentioned that. Then along the top of each of the tapes, the airspeed, altitude, and vertical speed, these are the bugs. So these can be useful for just leaving yourself a reminder. This is the bug. The cyan bug is now meeting the airspeed right there. It's also something that the autopilot can follow. It can follow the airspeed, the altitude, the vertical speed. Things. Roger mentioned that this can be, when it's new, you might want the more traditional, especially as you're learning in an airplane. So we can go into, so as I said, everything about controlling is under menu. So menu, PFD tools, and I can turn off SynViz for one. So it's synthetic vision. Now we just have an attitude indicator that looks more conventional. And I can turn on 6-pack mode. And so 6-pack mode looks like what you'd expect it to. So you've got airspeed. This is angle of attack. This is attitude, altitude, turn coordinator, your DG and HSI, and vertical speed. I'll turn that back off. So turn SynViz on and 6-pack off. Leave that. Yeah, I mentioned angle of attack. There is a visual indicator for angle of attack. Frankly, I really prefer flying it audibly, because when you're, the time that you're going to use it the most is in your, round out and flare. And that's going to be the moment that you shouldn't really be watching this screen too much. Your eye should be out the window, except maybe for darting down for airspeed. But what's nice, so the way this angle of attack indicator works is as you are inclining into the airflow, as your angle of attack is increasing, this little bar goes away until it gets into the yellow and the red. But audibly, it kind of sounds like a beeping Geiger counter. It starts beep, 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 and it increases in frequency until you're at a solid tone at just about your stall angle of attack. And so, but I honestly almost never, watch that. I'm listening. And if you're in flight and you have an accelerated stall, you'll hear it as well. So in those cases, you probably aren't, staring at this gauge. I mentioned this is a DG. It's also an HSI. If I touch the little info window, this is now showing SkyView's navigation information. Our next waypoint is 22.5 nautical miles away. It's an airport, KPAE, which is Payne Field up here near Seattle. There's our CDI with our, the course direction, which is 90 degrees to us and we are flying away from course right now. There's a glide path that's programmed in here. It's giving us some vertical guidance towards the airport or runway, depending on how it's set up. And we can also, if you have an Avidyne IFD for IFR flight, or any of the Garmin products, the GTNs, the GNSs, the newer GPS 175 and whatnot, you can connect that and we show its GPS, and we can also show the nav radio. So if you have a VOR ILS coming through one of those dedicated IFR navigators, you can connect that up as well. That's basically the primary flight display basics. Let's see, a couple other neat things. The attitude indicator, so let's kind of turn ourselves. This is showing 10, 20, 30, 45, 60 degrees, or 45, 60 degrees. These little cyan, the little blue arrows are showing us, and those will move in and out from the center with airspeed. So they're saying for the speed we're at right now, I would need to be at about 10 degrees to do a standard rate turn. So that's those are standard rate turn markers. And so that's helpful for if you are flying in IFR. That's basically the PFD. The engine instruments in SkyView HDX are a little different than previous products. So in SkyView Classic, the 20% view of the engine was a vertical page. On SkyView HDX, it's along what we call the bottom band. And here we have, let's see if I just reconfigure the display. I'm going to put the mat back on. So here we have everything along the bottom. And we do have the ability with the mat to grow this to get rid of, or to cover effectively the right side of the engine instrument. So all of your core stuff generally lives under the PFD. And then when you're setting up, you want your auxiliary, or let's say your not non-critical, but the things that you're not going to be eyeballing all the time over here, because they can be grown over. And that's all configurable. You can choose what goes here versus there. But just running across real quick, so we've got fuel quantity. These are direct, fuel quantity measurements using the in-tank resistive probes or capacitance probes if you're using those. So we can support many tanks left and right is, of course, most common. We've got manifold pressure, tachometer, fuel flow if you opt to install the fuel flow meter. I think it's a great idea. I'll explain a little bit about that in a bit. Fuel pressure, oil temperature, all of your CHTs and EGTs on most engines. Battery volts, or just their aircraft system volts, amps. You can set this up as an ammeter or a load meter, so it can measure what the battery's producing, or what the alternator's producing, or how much current's going in and out of the battery. You choose which way you want to set it up. People have different opinions on what they like how they like that to read. Trim. This is only showing elevator trim, but it can show elevator, aileron, and rudder trim, and then flaps. Is configurable. There are also some interesting, once you start putting together the different information that SkyView has access to, we can tell you if you're running a Lycoming or Continental engine, whether you're lean or rich or peak or at peak in terms of your exhaust gas temperatures at all times. So you don't even need to be in a special lean mode. It just tells you whether you're lean or rich. Your percent power, of course, you got your timers, your Hobbs and tach timers. And then this negative 113 gallons remaining is just a quirk of our demo mode, but this is part of the fuel computer that is enabled with the fuel flow gauge. So I mentioned that we can reconfigure the display. So this is a nice condensed, easy to scan view, but maybe I want to see some more details or blow some of the stuff up. We can go to display, say we want the engine on the right-hand side of the screen, and now instead of paving over the map, we have bigger EGTs and CHTs. This is all the same, although it could be different. And then over here, we've got a series of timers and performance parameters, which are coming off of our fuel computer. So that includes information like gallons remaining, which we also had down here. All of this is configurable, so you can put these widgets all over the place. These layouts, you can literally etch a sketch them. I'll show you that in a second around the screen in setup mode. Gallons used, and this is different than the fuel quantity. So this gallons used is basing off of the fuel flow, and you, the pilot, telling the system what you're doing or what the fuel state is at the beginning of a flight. So it's saying that we've used 16 gallons since the beginning of the flight. Since we know GPS and we know how much fuel you're using because we have the fuel flow gauge installed, SkyView can tell you how many miles per gallon you're making. This is real fun when you have a tailwind. what your waypoint, what your gallons are at the next waypoint, and what your range based on how fast you're tracking via GPS, what your range till empty is based on your fuel consumption. And so I mentioned these are the direct quantity measurements. This is telling you what's in the tank as measured by the float, usually a float in the tank, whereas this gallons used and the gallons remaining are based on the fuel computer. So how do we tell it how much fuel is in the tank? Well, we go to menu, we go to engine tools, and we go to fuel. And then this is saying, well, we're measuring 20 gallons in the tank, and you say you've got 113 gallons in the tank. So we could say, oh, we know we just fill the tank, so there's 30 gallons in the tank. Or if I have, let's say, tabs in the fuel tanks at 20 gallons or something, now we've got 20 gallons in the tank when I hit that preset button. Or I could just say match what measures. So this is just setting the initial state for the fuel computer, which is then adding up every little bit of fuel going through the fuel flow sensor to give you some of these other performance metrics. So this is essentially what what you would consider what is a fuel computer. So it's two ways of measuring fuel. It gives you a lot of performance-oriented calculations versus the tank measurements, which are just telling you exactly what's in the tank. What's also nice about the direct tank measurements when you're using a system like SkyView is that we calibrate to your tanks. So unlike a traditional gauge where you might have, it's terrible. It's basically kind of right near empty, and then it's everything else. It's, there's a big dead spot in the middle. Since when you install your SkyView system, what you'll end up doing is demonstrating to SkyView the shape and dimension of the tank and how those floats move. And you do that by literally filling the tank. So you say, put a gallon in, push a button, put another gallon or 2 gallons, depending on how big your tanks are. So that means that this, even though the tanks are, often not shaped symmetrically, or the float isn't moving constantly for every gallon, we can accommodate for that. So this number is basically always right. That is kind of the key thing. And also, if we did have a second screen, I'll just show you really quick, we can reconfigure a screen to be a full screen engine monitor. So if you do have 2 screens, you could have this screen on your right. You could also do this with map. So you can combine any of the screens together. So we could have engine instruments and map, and all of that's completely configurable. I'll also just show you real quick. I'll go into, as Mark mentioned earlier, 2 buttons for setup mode. It's button 7 and 8. And now we're in setup mode. And this is sort of, everything is pretty easy to read. You just, drag or, twist the knob, engine monitor setup. I'm going to go to what we call the screen layout editor. And I'll adjust the 100% page. And so this is the page that we just saw, but now we're in setup mode. And I can say, okay, I'm going to adjust my oil pressure gauge. And I'm going to move it somewhere else. I'm going to give it a different style. Maybe I just want it to be a number, and I just want a number. I want it next to oil temperature. I want it to be a different size. This isn't maybe how we do it, but and then I can save that. And you can do this with all of the gauges. There are lots of different styles for little bars and arcs and reverse arcs and horizontal bars. So you can, if you just don't like the way this looks, you can customize this to your heart's content. That's the engine monitor. Let me just get back to my display. And so last what I'll show you here is the moving map before I go back to questions. So the moving map works sort of how you'd expect. It is one like a map. Actually, let me just reset, get us near an airport so we can show you a few things. All right, so here we're taking off out of pane field. I can use my fingers to pinch to zoom. You can see, fly kind of down runway heading. You see we have extended center lines for all the different runways. We also have lots of things going on in terms of airports and airspaces and obstacles. You can see these obstacles that are the little yellow, the same symbol that you'd see on charts. So they're yellow when things are kind of not quite a factor, slightly below you. They're red when they are a factor, and they disappear when they're no longer a factor. You also have, zoom out, we'll go to someplace else. Airports, so we got airports scattered around. If we touch an airport, we get basic information. If I press info, we'll get a lot more information, including pattern altitude, what services are available. If we go along the top here, we've got comm radio frequencies, which I guess this is a private airport, so it doesn't have. And let me find a different airport. Arlington, here's Arlington. This is Arlington, Washington. So here we've got comm radio frequencies, plates including airport diagrams if you have those loaded into the system. Runway information, the remarks. This is all of the information that's in the airport facilities directory, the remarks section. So the little green books that nobody buys anymore. If we have ADS-B weather coming in, this is decoded weather. You also look at it raw if you want. I don't know why you'd want to, but you could do that. You also get the TAF if there is one for the airport, and the nearest winds aloft, which in this case is Seattle, and it tells you what those winds aloft are. So that's sort of all the airport information. But right here, so we're flying kind of in the busy-ish Seattle airspace. We've got, I'm just going to touch a spot on the map, like what's going on right here? Okay, well, there's a Class D airport. This is Payne Field's airspace, surface to 3,100 feet. But there's also, you can see there's more airspace. Well, that's what this little arrow here is on the box, where if I touch the arrow, it's like, oh, well, now we're looking at this is CTAX, Class Bravo. It starts at 6,000, ends at 7,000. So if we're touching something like even like an airport, and we've got the airport, but then we've got things like its airspace and CTAX airspace overlaid, we can just kind of ripple through, zoom in and out through those layers with those arrow buttons. And that's basically how you use the map. So you pinch to zoom, you can zoom in and zoom out. So if you always want to get all the way, across the country real quick, it's super easy. We can, find Newark Airport in like a heartbeat, without even having to look it up. So you just use a combination of the zoom in, zoom out. You can use your fingers to pinch the zoom, or if I want to navigate there, I can just say, okay, Newark Airport. Let's get let's say direct to, and there's, yep, Newark Airport. That's where I want to go, and direct to. And now I just have one, big single leg from the Seattle area to Newark. If I go to the flight plan, we get some information, one direction to fly, how far, 2,000 miles, and how long it's going to take if we had gas tanks or bladders that lasted that long. If I wanted to add some intermediate waypoint, I can, let's say we want to add, I don't know, maybe like Oshkosh. So I'll just, oops, kind of go to, or somewhere near Oshkosh anyway. And I'll just go nearest. What are the nearest airports towards the, so I tap the spot on the screen. I'll go back and show what I did. I just touch the spot on the screen, and then that's where the cursor is. We also get some information about how far away that is. I can say, information about, or nearest, as I was saying. So the nearest airport is Appleton. I got pretty close. Let's say we want to stop at Oshkosh on the way to Newark. So I will just say add the flight plan, and I want to go there first. So then I just add it above using the knob, and I say insert. And now we have, we should have, oops, and I got to tell I want to go there. So go direct to Oshkosh. So now we have, we're going from Seattle, Oshkosh, Newark, and then the flight plan menu reflects that. That's sort of like basic flight plan. There's a bunch of other ways you can add things to the flight plan. I can, I can just go to info. I can type in the next airport and say add the flight plan. We can. There's a few other ways as well. A sort of basic map interface. There are different ways to view the map. So right now, what we're seeing is the basic map view with terrain alerting. So this is saying that all of this stuff is red and yellow, this kind of darker red and yellow. This is all terrain that's higher than us. So if, we need to climb if you want to get over the northern Cascades here. The brighter, red and yellow, this is the weather. So this is playing back a kind of a ADS-B recording in this case, because it's actually quite nice here today in Seattle. And so you're seeing some weather, and you can animate it, and even we can see the airports right now. You can see that Arlington is green. That means the weather is good. It's VFR. Would-be Naval Air Station also. Looks like Skagit Bayview is not. Let's just touch it and say info. What's the weather there? It's marginal VFR. So all that information is pretty much just at your fingertips. That's kind of the map overview. Oh, if I want the map to look different, if I want to show different things on the map, we go to menu, map layers. There's map layers, which we can turn on or off our topographical, the terrain essentially. We can turn on sectionals. I'm not sure if I have them on here. Do I have them on here? I do have them on here. So we have sectionals, IFR low, IFR high. So this is the actual paper chart. If you actually want to see some of the things that might not be in the Dynon digital data, there's not much of it, frankly. But if you do want to see to see some of the notations that the charters do put on sectionals and other charts, you can overlay that and zoom way in, and you're just reading the paper now. Similarly, if you are flying IFR, or we just want to see the charts associated with an airport, we can bring up the airport information. We go to the plates, so we get the airport diagrams. That's one thing we can do, is airport diagram. We can look at, if you're flying IFR, you can bring up those plates. They are geo-referenced, so right now we're kind of flying over the plate, which is kind of neat. If I were to just reset again and then real quickly get back there to where I was, bring up the airport diagram. And so here, if we were taxiing around right now, it's kind of flying, but you can see we're overlaid on the airport diagram with all the information that we need there. There's also, so we can configure, as I said, we go to menu, map layer, map layers, turn on and off the sectionals. You can turn on and off different elements of the weather. There's other things we could do with the map, like how it's displayed as well. So I won't get into that now, though. So let's see. Let's get rid of that. That's basically the primary flight instruments, the engine, and the map, sort of a very quick overview. Oh, we also do have, so just like you have on a lot of, tablets, iPads and phones, you have a button that looks like this, which is the kind of lets the map grow to be the whole screen. When it's not, you have the bottom band, which takes up some space. But then also you have all of these interesting map-oriented, and there's a lot of different things you could put here. There are 10 fields, and you can select from, I think it's like 15 or 20 different things, which are information about, here we've got GPS altitude, what our next waypoint is, the distance to the waypoint, ETE next, the ETA next, the lat long of where we currently are, what's our destination airport, distance to go. So there's all kinds of like neat map-oriented things that you would use in flight. So that's sort of a quick overview on the flight instruments, map, and engine. Any questions on that before I move on?
Mike, there was one good question which said that was a lot of data. Does that all live on the hard drive? Maybe touch on the difference between what is on the hard drive versus what lives on a USB stick. Yeah,
that's a great question. So we make available on our website every 28 days the FAA cycle of what we call the digital airport, and the digital data, which encompasses airports, airspaces, it encompasses obstacles, and that's updated on the FAA cycle, sort of like the charts, if you will. But then the actual charts, the paper charts, and the airport diagrams and the IFR plates, those are a bit different. So the digital data that's on our website is a quick download. You put it on a USB stick, and then you bring that to the airplane. You plug it into the USB port, which is often on the panel. I can show you the spotlight this again. So, on here we have, for example, USB ports on the panel. A lot of people, have that, or you can have just a cable kind of hanging down behind the panel. Some people do that as well. You plug that in, you load it up. It takes a few minutes, and then you have your digital data, which are all these airports and airspaces, all up to date. Now, if you do want the sectionals and the charts and the airport diagrams, that's a separate. That's a little bit different. That's a lot of data, gigabytes of data. The hard drive in SkyView is actually pretty big, but it doesn't. But that data set is now, I think, like 10 or 15 gigabytes. And so then what you do is you get that chart data by subscribing to our partners at Seattle Avionics. It's $99 a year, and they frequently run specials, so you can get either lifetime deals or multi-year deals. They do that periodically. But still, I think the lowest cost chart data in the industry when you choose Dynon. And then you put them on a USB stick, and then you plug that USB stick into the port, whether it's on the panel or behind the panel, and it lives there, and it basically is a hard drive that's connected to the display. So you have one of those little USB sticks per display in your aircraft. What I recommend people do, these USB sticks are like $10. We actually give you one that with SkyView, it's actually a little bit of a longer stick, but what a lot of people will do is you buy the real shorty sticks from Amazon. They're like $10 for a 16 or 32 gig, and you buy four, or if you have one display, you buy two. If you have two displays, you buy four. And what you do then is you have one that's in the airplane, that's the current cycle, and then you bring the next one home, and when the data is coming up for update, you load that stick, you go to your airplane, and you swap it out. And so that's how you handle data in SkyView. Pretty straightforward, actually. Any other questions? John Marzulli, how are you? A local.
Yeah. I meant to ask this earlier, but I was commuting. Also, thank you for the flight briefing. I can confirm Arlington's looking pretty nice right now. But I've got an older flight deck, 180 in my bird, and you had mentioned upgrade trade-in values. Are you offering any trade-in sorts of things right now for the 180?
It's so not right this moment, but it's literally, it's most likely the next program. So we've been kind of doing a couple of interesting programs. We have a special on the D3, which is a kind of a charity fundraiser for the organization that Sun and Fun funds, which is it's called the Aerospace Center of Excellence, which is basically like an aviation STEM high school. And so they didn't get all of their funding this year because Sun and Fun got canceled, because the Sun and Fun is a fundraiser for that. So there's a special for our D3 product that funds that. We also have a refer a friend special. So if you are a SkyView customer right now, and you refer somebody else, you'll get them a discount off of a SkyView system, and then we give you as a thank you as a SkyView customer, you get a jacket from us. It's the same awesome jackets that we wear around shows. They're North Face, they're pretty high quality. And then one of the next programs, probably the next program we'll launch, will be a trade-in program for what we call the D10, D100 series, including the Flight Deck D180. Can't comment just yet on what the value might look like, but we have done them before, and they are pretty popular. So expect that soon.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Peter.
How do you get to the checklists?
Yeah, so let's see. So I don't have them loaded here. So I should, but basically it's right under. So all of the, as I said before, all of the things that you can accomplish, like all the features, are all under menu. So they go to menu, checklist. Actually, let's see. Does the other one have it? Menu. Yeah, neither of these displays have a checklist installed. So menu, checklist, then you get a list of multiple lists. If you have, let's say, a takeoff, an emergency list, and then you use the knob to scroll up and down through the checklist. So that's just under, again, menu, checklist.
And then the real estate would be the area where you.
Right, exactly. So the rule of thumb with SkyView is, so you can put the flight instruments and then the bottom band on either side, and that will basically never go away when you have that on assigned, when you have this display assigned to primary flight instruments. And then the other side of the screen, which is usually the map and then the kind of the secondary engine instruments, that can be paved over by, let's say, different menus like Autopilot or the comm radio, or in that case, the menu checklist. So it just kind of goes right here. So you get your lists right there.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then Jonathan.
Yeah, so I've been using my Dynon in my 750 for about a year now. And one of the things that always used to burn me was I would take the half-hour drive to the airport where I had no Wi-Fi. And all I had was my iPhone and my iPad, but you can't sideload from an iPad or an iPhone directly on the console. And that created a lot of consternation for a while because I would always be flying, you know, with slightly legal because my phone had current maps on it, you know, and my iPad had the current maps through ForeFlight. Then I came across, there are these little adapters now, and with the latest version of the iPhone and iPad, you can basically download from your iPhone and then use the Files application to copy it onto the USB drive and then stick it into the Dynon, and you make it work. And you can use either SD cards with an SD card adapter, or you can use USBs. And similarly, if you have an Android phone and you have an SD card, you can download it to your files on your Android, pop it off onto one of these adapters, and then move it over to the Dynon. And then for flight plans, the connection to ForeFlight and FlightQ, where you can sync your flight plans, is really great. And if my Garmin IFR GPS would participate in the economy, then that would be perfect. But you know, you can only ask so much.
And you know, to add on to that, so there are these USB memory sticks, and so I use this one when I'm updating the airplane. Where so I'm an Android guy, so this is you know, USB-C on one side and USB-A, or the regular USB, like what you would connect on the other side. And so you can literally download from your phone. As you said, you get to the airport and you don't have Wi-Fi. You plug this into your phone, and they get their Lightning ones for iPad as well. And then you pop it out of your phone. You put the other end, the regular USB end, into the SkyView port, and then you do that. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. That's a really great tip. Oh, sorry, I just muted you. What were you gonna say?
I was going to say that the idea of having the alternating USB sticks is perfect if you're one of those people who keep it on your calendar with reminders and everything.
Right.
But most of us, you know, just show up at the hangar and go, crap, map expired.
Right. All right. So I'm going to let's see. We're at 5:30. This goes until 6. I want to cover just the kind of the rest of the system. I'll do it in a little bit more of a brief version today. We will very likely do more events for the Zenith community. And also, we've done these virtual booth visits before. You can go to our Facebook page or our web page or our YouTube page. It's on all of those now. And you can go back and look at, probably the first one is the one where it was a little bit more seminarish and a little less interactive. So if you go look at that, you can sort of get a little bit more in depth. I'm going to cover the comm radio, transponder, ADSB in and out, and then a couple of other of the other system accessories. So comm radio. The comm radio is actually, let's see, let me get me a spotlight here. All right, so the comm radio is one of the neatest things about the way SkyView, or one of the neatest SkyView features. So our comm radio is, I like to call it revolutionary, because I can fly from Seattle to Oshkosh and never ever, not never ever, but almost never actually, you know, use these two knobs. It's maybe hard to see here. Let me just get a different angle on this. So we got the dual concentric knob that tunes the frequency. We click that, we're flipping the standby frequency. That's kind of the standard way a radio works, right? But usually what we do, let's get adjusted here. The way the SkyView radio works is I'll just press the airport button, and then we get a list of nearest airports. And you can see we have it on the display, and it also is over here. And let me actually just reset to where we are. Okay, so airport button. So I'm going to get nearest airports, and let's just say we'll go to Bellingham. And so now I've got Bellingham up on the screen, and I click, and now Bellingham's loaded. And now, instead of twisting the knob for the frequencies, well, there's only really 4 categories of frequencies you ever, you know, use kind of in VFR flight, even IFR flight. One is I'm going to get my weather, or ATIS, or ASOS. So I press that. So in this case, it's ASOS, and it just loaded it in from the airport. And then I pushed, you know, to make it active. Next, I'm going to go hit my CTAF frequency, or tower. This is Bellingham. It's a class Charlie, I think, or Delta. But anyway, it's a towered airport. and there might be multiple frequencies. There might be a unicom, there might be a CTAF frequency that's different. There's tower, and now I go talk to them, flip-flop that in. And then a few minutes later, I'm gonna get sent off the ground, and there's my ground frequency for Bellingham, and I load that. And so that's kind of just the in or on airport frequencies. If we are flying IFR, we can press ATC and it'll bring up my departure or the nearest departure and approach frequencies that are associated with that airport. If once I'm in flight, all I'm really going to ever do is I'll say, okay, airport, what's my nearest airport? It's that one. What's the tower or unicom or CTAF? And just load that in. And so you can go all across the country, just kind of like every few minutes, just like, hey, what's the nearest airport? And listen to whatever the traffic is, a couple of button pushes away. And of course you can, if you are, if I'm flying to Oshkosh and in my airplane, which has of course a full Dynon panel, if we're using like an air-to-air frequency, we'll use that, or if you're monitoring emergency as you can. So that's one of the really neat and different things about the way the SkyView comm radio works. You can also do all the other things that that all the rest of the avionics systems can do. We can go nearest airport, would be air station, and then go to the comm frequencies, and then say, tune the comm. I guess tune tower. It does the same thing. It just shot the frequency up there. Same thing with all these other. If there are multiple, let's say departures, this little diamond telling us there's some information about it, saying, oh, this is for the west side of the west of the airport. So there might be some narrative information in there. So that's kind of the comm radio. Oh, all these controls are also available with the touchscreen. So if I just touch there, we get all those same ground or tower frequencies. There's the frequencies there. We can type them in instead of spinning them. So there's what we call dual watch, which is a single transceiver radio, but we can monitor what's in the standby frequency at the same time. So you can listen to, so if there's something going on standby frequency, you'll hear that. If the primary does take precedence, so if something is going on the primary frequency, this is good. You can, like, for example, listen to ATIS, but then still hear your tower or common traffic communications with dual watch. It's basically a very quick comm radio introduction. Transponder, that's over here, and the third way to get to that. So okay, of course we can use the knob module that I showed up here. We can touch that, or we can go, as I said, everything about controlling is under menu. So menu, comm radio. So that's kind of the three ways that you can do that. Transponder, same thing. That's the transponder right there. We touch that and we get the transponder menu. This is set up in our demo mode, but really there's usually an auto mode. So you don't even need, so if you're flying VFR, if you're not going to squawk a discrete frequency, you basically don't think about your transponder. It knows when you're on the ground, it knows when you're in the air, it does all that switching automatically. And that's a kind of a certified feature of the transponder. So most of the time you're not even thinking about the transponder, but if you do get a discrete code, you can type it in here. And if you're asked to ident, which you usually are, you pop that, and then that'll light up to show your identing. If you just want to go back to squawking VFR, 1200, you could also set it to the European code, which I forget what it is, but it's not 1200. And that's the transponder in a nutshell. So same thing, we can get to the transponder by touching the transponder area or by going to menu, transponder. And the transponder, it's a Modash transponder. It's also your ADS-B out device. And that is what allows you to be part of the ADS-B system so that you are both legal to fly now that it's in certain airspaces, now that it's 2020. And it also does something else which is critical, which is, although you can get, let's say, a portable ADS-B receiver that connects to a tablet, if you are not participating in the ADS-B system, meaning if you are not squawking either via a Modash transponder with ADS-B out or via the other way, which is the UAT, if you're not actually sending your ADS-B position out, you're not waking up the ground stations, and you're not getting all of the traffic. So, what I mean, you're not getting all the traffic. You will see with any receiver, whether it's SkyView's ADS-B traffic and weather receiver, or something else like a Stratus that's connected to an iPad, or any of the other, or Stratux, or any of the devices that you can get, you will see traffic that is emitting, you will see other traffic that is broadcasting information via ADS-B. But you still have a decent percentage of the fleet. It's getting smaller and smaller every month now, but a decent percentage of the fleet that isn't equipped with ADS-B. And so in that case, what the ADS-B system will do is it says, okay, I will take all of the radar targets, the Mode C radar targets that I can see, put them together into a picture and tell you about them. So it's a hockey puck of traffic. It's like a 15-mile radius and plus or minus 3,500 feet around you. But you only get that hockey puck of traffic if the system, the ADS-B system, knows where you are. So that's why it's important to be an ADS-B out, in addition to it being the law in many airspaces. You don't get the full traffic picture if you're not sending your ADS-B position out. So the SkyView transponder does that. It's one of its core features. So we talked about ADS-B in and out. So then a couple other, so I'm going to talk about kind of together Autopilot, and I'm not going to get too into Autopilot because of timing, but I'll kind of give you the basics. So Autopilot, again, that's the whole left bar here. We can touch that and bring up the Autopilot menu. We could also, similarly, we can go to menu, Autopilot, and we get the same menu. And then if we're equipped with, there are two hardware devices that you can opt for. This is the knob control panel, and this is a dedicated panel for controlling the things that you adjust the most in flight, which is your heading, your altimeter setting, and your altimeter setting. So these three knobs are the equivalent of this knob when I'm changing the function. So it's easy to do this, it's by touching and rotating, but it's even easier to just have a dedicated knob. So a lot of people choose to buy that, especially when you're equipping with Autopilot. And then, so similarly, here's the Autopilot menu on screen, and here's an Autopilot control panel. So same thing, dedicated controls. You'll see that these buttons are, let's see, these buttons here, and then we've got the up and down. Sorry if I'm making anybody dizzy, but this is a set of hard controls plus the level button that's in one convenient module. This is also a trim controller. So if you have electric trim, it's kind of two products in one. This will get rid of any relay deck or it will allow you to skip buying that you would have otherwise. It also, if you have the Autopilot, so the Autopilot can, when you're flying and let's say you change configuration, you go from a level flight to a climb, the Autopilot will, even if you don't have this, it'll tell you, hey, I'm holding excess pressure on the stick, just like you would be as a pilot if you haven't adjusted trim, and it'll say trim up or trim down near the Autopilot status area here. If you have this module, it can and it's already your trim controller. When you're under Autopilot control, it can automatically adjust your trim in slight increments. So we call that Autopilot auto trim. So how does the Autopilot work? I'm actually going to change it. And there are two ways that the Autopilot works. This is what we call expert mode. If you're an airline pilot, a lot of these buttons are going to look familiar. You've got Autopilot and heading mode and track mode, which is which way you're pointing, which way the airplane's going over the ground. We can use whatever HSI information, whether it's SkyViews or a third-party navigator like the Avidyne or the Garmin boxes. We can set it to follow the magenta needle when we're on a cross-country flight. Similarly, you've got altitude hold, and we have modes where you can hold a vertical speed or hold an indicated airspeed. Holding indicated airspeed is really great when you're kind of in your climb out after you've gotten yourself to pattern altitude or beyond, and you want to, let's say, do VY for best rate, or maybe you want to do like VY plus 10 because your engine gets a little hot in the climb on a hot day. My airplane does that. So you can climb at a certain airspeed and you end up with whatever vertical speed you want, and the Autopilot will do that for you. Similarly, SkyView's map, I didn't demonstrate it today, but it has the ability to show you, to give you vertical guidance in terms of how many feet per minute you need to get to your destination. So if we were following that, we could say, okay, vertical speed, and I want 500 feet per minute descent. This is the expert mode, and as I've been pushing buttons, you may have noticed that the Autopilot is on. It's green. That means on, and both the lateral axis or the roll axis and the pitch axis are both active. That's those two little green arrows. And right now, in roll, it's in roll hold, which means it's trying to hold whatever angle that I had. That's how the Autopilot engages in this expert mode, and it's waiting to capture GPS, meaning it's waiting to capture the course so that it can then transition from roll hold mode to GPS mode. This is showing an active mode in the blue and an armed mode for that it's waiting to transition to. Similarly, this is saying I'm in vertical speed mode and pitch at 300 feet per minute down. Let me just make this more realistic here. And so we're going 300 feet per minute down, and we're chasing an altitude. What altitude are we chasing? We're chasing 2,700 feet. Let me adjust the altitude real quick to make it, let's see, 4,500 feet, I suppose. And we'll climb quicker. She'll make it 4,800 feet. And what's going to happen is as I get close to my altitude, it goes and captures that altitude. So you saw that the autopilot mode just switched. It started flashing. It'll chirp in your ear, say autopilot mode. And the expert mode is very powerful, really great for IFR flight. But there's also another mode that a lot of VFR folks use instead, which is called simplified autopilot mode. You wouldn't normally change this in flight, but so I go from expert mode to simplified mode. And now the autopilot controls are simplified down to just a few buttons. One is track plus out, which means I will follow the bug. You know, I'm going to point in whatever direction you want. So you can see over here saying track 342. I'm adjusting using the knob what direction I want to fly. So let's say I want to fly north. I could just bring it to 360. So we're gonna go fly 360, and it's just gonna maintain whatever altitude that we have in the bug. So it's saying altitude 4,800. If I change the altitude, climb, so it's gonna start a climb automatically. Unlike the expert autopilot, the simplified mode will just chase things. So it chases the bug, it chases the altitude. You don't have to arm or think about the autopilot in an expert way. You just change the altitude, it changes. If you want to adjust the vertical speed, we can fine tune that. And then the other thing it will do, so track plus out is point in a direction, fly an altitude. This other mode is HSI plus out, and that really just means fly the pink needle, fly whatever's in the map or the HSI, and same thing, hold altitude. So this is basically give me a direction, and this is go fly my flight plan, is what it boils down to. Yaw damper if you have it, which is probably not necessary in Zenith aircraft. Level button on screen, and then turning everything off. And so that's a kind of a real brief introduction into Autopilot. The last thing I'll touch on for just a moment are all of the, and perhaps when we do another one of these, we'll get more into kind of Autopilot, or you can go look at some of the previous ones where we have done a little bit more on the Autopilot. But I'll just bring you around the back, kind of the bits and pieces that we were talking about at the beginning of the hour. These are all the different modules. The ADAHRs, this is all of your flight instruments, including the accelerometers for force and the rate sensors for rate, angle of attack, pitot static, engine monitor module. This is what we call the ARINC module, which connects to those third-party navigators for IFR flight. The backup battery, the display is essentially a computer, right? So that's, you've got USB ports, Ethernet ports. These look like, in the olden days, what we called serial ports. They are a 9-pin connector, but that's just the connector. What these are actually are what we call SkyView network. These are what connect many, but not all of, but many of the modules that we make, including the comm radio, the knob panel, the engine monitor, the ADAHRs, and some of those other bits and pieces, using a common 9-pin interface. It's got dual redundant data, dual redundant power. So let's say you do have over time some harness that's like rubbing against a piece of metal, that the cables pass through. And let's say it does start to fray, or let's say you do have something, it's not perfectly strain released, and eventually, a wire breaks from vibration or whatnot. When you do lose, let's say one of those data buses, it'll enunciate on SkyView. It'll tell you on SkyView, hey, there's a data problem, but it'll also at the same time switch over to the backup network. And you'll have no loss of capability. It'll even tell you when you go into a setup menu where in the system it thinks it's seeing the problem. So it'll be like, oh, I'm seeing a problem here, here, and here, which tells you it's probably something over here. This is a comm radio, the transponder. These aren't actually wired realistically. This is a hub to connect multiple SkyView network components together. So this is not that far off from what you'd see in a real panel. And it's a lot different than the kind of the rat's nest that you would see in many systems. And all of these harnesses, including the engine harnesses and the primary flight display harnesses and the SkyView network harnesses. We basically manufacture all of them now. So you can buy those ready to go from us. So where with, let's say, competing systems, you might need to spend dozens or even hundreds of hours building harnesses. You really don't need to with SkyView. So that kind of wraps up the presentation, if you will. I'll stick around for another while, and so will some of the other Dynon folks if you guys have any questions. And if there's anything that I was kind of rushing there at the end, if there's anything that I missed that you'd like me to highlight, whether it's some of the people watching or any of the other Dynon people, I'm happy to answer questions now.
Well, Mike, we haven't had a ton of specific questions in the comments in the last few minutes, but everyone's been enjoying so far, it seems like.
If you do want to ask a question, one way to do that is, there you go, like Peter just said, you can raise your hand. And Peter, I'm going to go and unmute you. You might need to click a button there.
Yeah, like this is actually a question if the Zenith people are still there. Like the standard Zenith engine monitoring does not use the Dynon for the Rotax 912 IS. What is the difference between the standard Zenith engine monitoring and the Dynon?
Let's see, do we still have...
Roger looks like he's unmuting himself.
Okay.
Or I'll ask him to unmute.
Okay. Yes, so for the Rotax engine, we are still using the Dynon system to monitor the engine instruments.
But the IS like has a different make. The IS, the 912 IS. And you know, you have the two computers and you have more displays, and I'm not sure whether the Dynon can actually mirror that, the Dynon engine monitoring module for the 912 IS.
Yeah, on the IS, we haven't sold any instrument packages for the IS, so you are correct. There is a different unit that they're using for the engine monitor. Skytech, they had the 750 that they had the IS, and then the 1 Week Wonder had the IS that used it too. So I'm sure Mike can explain that a little bit better than I could. So.
Yeah, so from like a strictly Dynon perspective, the SkyView is completely capable of monitoring the 912 IS. So it uses we have two models of the engine monitoring module, one that has, this is kind of just a technical detail, but one that has CAN bus, which the IS engine uses, and one which doesn't. They cost the same, so it's just a matter of selecting the right one. And then we have a probe kit, and it's actually less expensive because the IS already comes with a lot of the sensors built into the ECU-based control. And so we get some of those engine instruments digitally right from the engine, and there's a few other probes that you connect to that as well. And then yeah, whether or not Zenith in their packages is offering that, I can't speak to. I admit I'm not familiar with their current offering on the IS, but if you did decide to do SkyView HDX and you wanted it to monitor your engine, it sure can.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let's see. We have
Hein, whoever that is, has had his hand up for a minute.
Okay. And they'll need to probably. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I've got a non-standard engine I'm going to use, an Aero Momentum, and it uses, of course, a non-standard temperature probe for the coolant. So I guess one concern I have is that I might have some difficulty calibrating that non-standard probe for the engine monitoring. So I wonder if you have some insight into that.
So I admit off the top of my head, I'm not familiar with the engine and its probes. The rough rule of thumb is you want to use the probes that we support, and they're not all ones that we sell. I'm not sure what they use for coolant, so I can't comment on that. it is possible, although admittedly it's not trivial, to build your own calibration profile for a sensor. But in general, now, does that engine use a coolant temperature sensor for its own monitoring system? Is that what you're getting at?
It does, but I mean, I want to try to interface that with my EMS. So I don't know, can you calibrate it resistance-wise in the Dynon?
Yeah, yeah, we should probably find out more about that sensor. There's a possibility, although it's only a medium possibility, that's something that we already support. Again, I'm not familiar with the sensor. Generally, what I recommend is, this might require a little extra plumbing, but using one of our temperature sensors in addition, if it's not one that is supported by the system. And again, it is possible to build curves for third-party sensors, but it's a little bit into the the expert territory. We actually have a page that describes how to do it on our wiki, but it is, again, it's not sort of it's not the most straightforward thing to do. If you're a math guy, it'll make sense. If not, it's a little bit of an expert thing.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. We've got Jonathan.
So one quick comment on it. I also have an engine. We've been discussing on the side. I have a Viking engine that has its own ECU that uses its own probes. But if you have something like that, like the Aero Momentum or Viking or anything like that, the probes don't cost all that much. Don't try to interface to the same probe from two different systems. You might do some electrical things you really don't want to do. So wire the separate probes so you use them on one and only one system. Anyway, the question I wanted to ask was, learning like ForeFlight and things like that, and learning how to use the G1000 when I was flying a G1000 172 while building my plane. The usefulness of being able to have iPad applications and other simulators. You're showing a simulation thing that I don't know that any of us can actually do ourselves, right? It's great demo, but until I can do it on my PC, there are a few functions I discovered only by watching you today, even though I've been flying it a year, because I can't really experiment when my first job is flying, right? And I can't do those sort of things in a hangar when I'm not really moving. So can we connect this to X-Planes 11 or Flight Simulator while we're sitting in the hangar? Or can we have something that runs on a PC or a tablet that or connects up to one of these commercial flight simulators?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, and we need to do more in this arena right now. There obviously exists a kind of demonstration mode that we don't currently make available to end customers, because it does take the unit into because it's not a fully supported sort of a thing in software. And what you don't want to have is something that is kind of in demo mode, but kind of not. And then you have, things like flight instruments, or especially the flight instruments, or even engine instruments that, if one's in demo mode, but one's not, or if it's not fully reset, you have to activate this mode by loading configuration files. Anyway, so it's a little bit of more of an advanced thing. It also has some limitations. If you were paying attention, if you know our system, the autopilot isn't actually behaving like an autopilot. It's kind of just following the bugs, and the modes aren't doing all the mode switching. So it's not really a good trainer from that perspective. It's good enough for me to show you concepts. That doesn't mean we'd never make a version of that, but we don't currently have that. There is also technically a way to interface our products with some of those flight simulator products, although again, it's not commercialized at this point. Sort of like one of those internal only things we use inside the company. But we do have on our list to kind of open that up and make that more consumer friendly. Of course, the other thing you mentioned is an iPad or PC based simulator or emulator, that sort of a thing. Those are all things that are on the table for the future. So I expect at some point we'll have a better either on product or pseudo product simulation training, solution there. don't have anything to announce today, but the bones are there. They're they're sort of they're the beginnings of a product or a feature. So we got a question from Charles.
Charles.
Hi, I'm in the process of doing an install of a SkyView HDX, and I got fastener components from Aircraft Spruce today, so I'm getting ready to put things together. I saw that when you went around the back of your panel, your simulator panel, you had a number of the components set out in just the way I would like to know how to do it.
Right.
Do you have images online that show sample installations like that?
So yeah, interesting. So we don't probably have enough of the back of panels. And what you did see here is a product. So this, technically you're looking at a certified panel, but the products are the same. But the one thing that is a little bit different is we started developing, actually just as a general philosophy within the company, we want to make installation both for home builders and for the certified side as easy as possible and go as quick as possible. And one of the products that we've developed that you saw, and I'll show you again, actually. So if just highlight the, if we highlight my my camera, I got it. Spotlight. Okay, so this is a mounting tray that has kind of all the holes drilled for the Adahars and these stacking plates which exist. Now some of these do exist in home built land already, but it's not terribly. But the whole complete solution isn't quite there. In fact, there's a new generation of this tray that's going to be coming out both for certified and home built soon. So before too long, you'll be able to kind of just make a brick of this stuff using 3 or 4 different pieces, and so that is something that's going to be more broadly available. We are going to probably have a sort of a contest kind of a thing where we're going to be asking for a lot more panel pictures, and actually, Jeff, you're listening, we should put behind the panel pictures on that list as well, because I'm sure people do have, as you were saying, pretty creative and interesting ways to organize things behind the panel. And especially, now I don't know if Roger might have any thoughts on how things go together on Zenith aircraft in particular, but that would be nice to have an image library of those things as well. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? Otherwise, we're coming up on 6 o'clock. We kind of perfectly timed that, although I apologize for speeding through. I know I sometimes become a, 300 word per minute motor mouth. All right, well.
I don't think so. I think everybody's got what they need.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight, and thanks for Sebastian and Mark and Roger for joining us and for representing Zenith and the Zenith family. And if any of you want to have any thoughts for what we might cover in a future event like this, whether it's Zenith focused or not, shoot me an email at mike@dynonavionics.com. And I know I did see a couple of you there are a couple of emails that I haven't responded to from previous ones, because I saw some of you in there. I think Robbie, I don't know if you're still out there, but I saw a name that is in my email inbox, and I'll get back to you. Or if you just have any comments about today's presentation or any other ideas for the future. So thanks for joining us, and have a great night, everyone.